Hello, Faith United Youth and anyone else who is joining us today. Welcome to our youth video for this week, the 21st of February, and we are in our first week of Lent. And so we've got a couple scriptures to look at today, and we are going to start by talking about fasting. I know that, Lent comes around and everybody starts talking about all the things they're giving up, and, McDonald's has extra Filet-O-Fish suddenly, and, all kinds of things are happening. So I kind of wanted to wrap our heads around some of this a little bit and look at what Jesus says about fasting. So we're going to start in the book of Matthew in the Gospels, and we're going to look at Matthew chapter 6. So I'm going to start with verse 1 because this is going to frame and give us a complete context, okay? I'm going to skip then to Matthew 6, verse 18. Sorry, verse 16. So I'm going to start with verse 1, then go to 16. So this is what Jesus says. He says, by the way, he is basically giving the Sermon on the Mount, if you've ever heard of that. It's a time frame when a bunch of people gathered around and he was kind of teaching his disciples, and everybody just kept gathering and gathering and gathering. And, he's sitting on a mountain and just kind of teaching, and he says so many things. And this is in the midst of that huge sermon. So, in Matthew chapter 6, he says, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them." Okay, so keep that in mind. Now we're going to go to verse 16, and he's still talking about various things, and then he starts to talk about fasting. So this is what he says. He says, "When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others that they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." Okay, so there's a couple things that I think is important to look at as we're talking about fasting. Jesus, when he is talking to them, I think it's really important to note, he doesn't say, "if you fast." He says, "when you fast." This is kind of an expectation that he has. He is expecting that his disciples and his followers are going to fast in their lives, and he's kind of setting some parameters. So, he's saying, don't look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show that they're fasting. And so, if we go back to verse 1 where he's saying, whatever you're going to do, he says, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. So it's all about your heart. Are you doing things to look good in front of others, or are you doing things to serve God? Okay, that's important. What is fasting? So, we've talked about this a little bit before, but just to kind of reiterate, fasting, particularly in the Bible, is meant to be a giving up of food to kind of, commemorate and commune with God, and it's a way of sacrifice. And in the Bible, they mostly gave up food. We see that when Jesus was tempted in the wilderness by Satan, he didn't eat for 40 days, and so a lot of New Testament fasting kind of follows that. In the Old Testament, they would fast sometimes if they were in a time of mourning after a death, if they were going to war. It's meant to be a time frame that is kind of more, like we said last week, kind of more reflective, and a time to kind of, give something up so that we can have that reflection. Nowadays, you see people fasting all kinds of things. So sometimes people will fast food. Sometimes they'll fast specific kinds of food. Sometimes they'll fast, a lot of people fast chocolate. Social media, people are fasting a lot. And then, posting all over social media how they fast about it, which is what we're talking about today, which you shouldn't do. We see Jesus, he's cutting to the core of the matter with this, okay? So he is saying, let's not, try to make ourselves look good in front of others. He's saying that, like, basically the hypocrites are, usually he talks about the Pharisees when he's talking about the hypocrites. They're these religious people, and it was like, look at me, I'm so good, and I'm so holy, and I'm so religious. and look at me, I'm fasting now. And he would, he said they would even like disfigure their faces and look really, sad and like, oh, I'm fasting, so people would kind of think, oh wow, they're really something, and Jesus is saying, don't do that. The approach is put oil on your face, wash your face, make yourself look good while you're fasting so that nobody knows. He's saying this should be done in secret. We shouldn't be like all over the place, like, well, let me tell you about my fast. No, Jesus is saying don't do that, He's saying, when you fast, only the Father should know, who's unseen. It shouldn't be, we shouldn't be with our megaphones telling people all over the place while I'm fasting. Jesus is being very clear that, this is a heart issue. And, he's always bringing it back to our hearts, isn't he? He's always going back to the core of the matter, which is our hearts between us and God and our relationship with God. So once again, fasting is not meant to show the world how holy you are. It's meant to be something between you and God, and it's sacred. So here's a question for you. How do you do this? How do you fast if you're not feeling it? I am a person who is I feel things. I feel like I can't do things if I'm not feeling it. So how do you feel a feeling that you don't feel? And this is something that I constantly have to struggle with. If you're somebody who's like, well, I really want to fast, but like my heart's not in it. So how do I do that? Because I don't want to do it if my heart's not in it. Well, this is what you do. You prepare to fast. Okay. So if you're in that situation right now and you're saying, I really want to be authentic and I want my relationship with God to be authentic, but it's just not there right now. What you can do is you can start by praying about it and asking God and saying like, God, I want this to be authentic. So please show me how. And then the next thing you do is you do the right thing, right? So you move on and you take the step. You start your fast and you continue that prayer. God, please help my heart to be right in this. And, the more you are obedient to God, then the more he will honor you with that. Fasting is not about giving up. It's about letting God in. And that's the most important thing. As you're preparing, ask God to give you strength, ask him to help you with your self-control, and ask him to move in your heart and truly bring that change in your life. Once again, it's not about our sacrifices, it's about our hearts. So we're going to look a little bit at Isaiah, and this is where we're kind of going to end. This is a book in the Old Testament, of course. Isaiah was a prophet, and in chapter 58 of the book of Isaiah, God is basically speaking through Isaiah, and he's kind of saying, this is what I think about fasting when you're fasting. Okay, so this is what Isaiah 58 says. Okay, so shout it aloud, do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their rebellion, and to their descendants of Jacob their sins. Day after day they seek me out. They seem eager to know my ways, as if they were a nation that does what's right and has not forsaken the commands of its God. They ask me for just decisions and seem eager for God to come near them. Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves and you have not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting you do as you please and exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is this the kind of fast I have chosen? Only a day for people to humble themselves? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed and for lying in sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood. Then your dawn will break forth. Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will appear quickly. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. So basically what God is saying here is, the Israelites, they were in big trouble in this time frame because it was all about show and there was, no heart behind it, like we talked about. And this is what Jesus was kind of saying. he's saying, you know, God is saying, like, they're saying, like, well, we're fasting, we're doing the thing, but like, you're not doing anything about it, God. And God is basically saying, like, yeah, I can see that you're like acting it out, but your heart's not in it, because like at the same time that you're fasting, you're also exploiting people, and you're like oppressing people, and you're hurting people. And that is not my way. God's way is always love, and his way is always justice. And you know, if you're gonna fast, it's not just a one day thing where, you know, you're giving something up and then you're gonna live your life however you want it. God is saying, you know, what you do matters. What you know, how you act with other people, how you love other people is important to me. And so, you know, going back to what Jesus said, when you fast, you know, make sure that your heart is in it. And once again, if you have issues with that, pray and ask God, because he wants to help you with this, and he wants to have that true connection with you. So I hope that that's encouraging to you. I hope that's maybe a little informative about what fasting is, what it isn't, what it should be, what it shouldn't be. And if you guys have any questions about it, you know, feel free to text me, call me, and I'd love to talk through it with you. If you're feeling like I'm just trying to do this and it's not working out, or it feels weird, I would love to talk to you about that. So I hope you guys are, you know, taking this to heart, and I hope that it blesses you, and I hope you have an amazing day, and I will look forward to talking more about this season of Lent with you next week. So God bless. Thanks again.